Peace, family. This is your boy Juro. It's the 22nd of April, 2020. I hope you guys are well. I just had my first little battle with my fur babies because I had to clip their nails. I know that for those who have pets, that can be a test. See, I ain't even said nothing. Tyson already got to be on there. Now, ain't nothing wrong with him. He just want to be out of his kennel. But I wanted to share something, and I know that it will reach the intended heart and mind and intended time, because it's all divine timing. And so this morning, while I was quiet, got up, started my day, making my coffee. I'm just getting to it now. And I went into prayer, giving thanks for life, just being present of the now, what's going on right now, the things that make your reality. And in the process, you ain't got to even question. I send prayers out to you, to the intended heart, the intended mind. And I hope that you're well. And no matter what your circumstances is, what you perceive as a challenge, you're going to conquer it. You're going to come right on through. You might have to roll up your sleeves. But 50% of the work is already done because you're acknowledging what the task is required. And I know sometimes you can be afraid. You can be afraid. That's part of the human dynamic. And now, I know some of y'all like, damn, he really cut his hair. Yeah, I cut my hair off. I cut it off 2 weeks ago. And because that is nothing but an extension of you. Your character, your inner beauty is found within yourself. Don't you ever forget that. Don't let no one tell you other than. But I've been wanting to talk a little deeper. Now that, 51, I can't believe it. I think somebody messed up my paperwork. I really do. But I got my vitality. I have my mortality. I have my opportunity. And the one thing that I find myself doing a lot, I've always been a deep thinker, always looking at the question mark of myself, how that applies to what makes my perceptions as based off of what is my reality. Now, I mentioned yesterday, I put a video out yesterday, because I got to check up on y'all. I got to let y'all know that you're being thought of. And what you see is what you get. Authenticity. Same person that's on this screen is the same person you would meet. And with all the things that have been going on internationally, worldwide, down to a town near you, a city near you, a state near you, I put all that in context and try to make the best concise decisions for my life. But the one thing that I cannot ignore, and I will not ignore, is my journey. Everybody has one. The highs, the lows, the moments that you may think you're stagnant, but really you're not. That is plateauing. The moments that you decide to afford yourself to be still. And the one thing that I've noticed is no matter where you go in this world, eventually all things will come full circle. Everything. Every action, every reaction, every decision. And the one thing that some of you have noticed since, especially the beginning of this year, because you remember the beginning of the year, I was always speaking over the year. But also letting you know to never forget where you came from, as well as to acknowledge what it took based off of the impact it had. And I would be remiss not to say this. I know some of y'all said, Gerald, just get to the point, Gerald. Get off the tangents. I love each and every one of you, because I know in the intended time and moment it's going to make sense. And if it doesn't apply, take this as insight and let this be your wisdom so that you don't have to. Since December 31st, which is New Year's Eve, when I had my episode regarding my heart, when I found out I had an issue with my heart, I have an enlarged aorta, by the way. For some of y'all, you said, that's your tower moment. Yeah, it is. It was. But I understand what will be, will be. And that's something we have no control over. And with that being said, I have to put this out. No man knoweth the time or moment they're going to take their last breath. Now, with that being said, the one thing that's been heavy on my heart has been the fact that I look back through the years. Some of you can think back as far as when you were a toddler. Some of you can do that. Some of you have accent points and highlights of when. And those things were the things that make your personality today. The joys, the sorrows. And to stay on point, the one thing that I've been trying to put a lot of energy in that I possibly can is not to live in regret, but to try to find understanding through it all. And some of you also know that it was right around that time that God afforded me the opportunity. I mean, this was all God's doing. To bring the forethought to let me know that, no, you have another child out there. Now, I know somebody's blood pressure just said, that's nothing but fear. That ain't nothing but courage that you haven't claimed yet. And like any person, there are certain nuances that you can't ignore. You can't. There's certain things that will be so impactful that it will bring you back to self. Some of you may already know what I'm talking about. And like any person in that situation, you start to think back of where you were. What was going on? What was what you deemed priority? What was your mentality? What were the factors that were going on at that time? And you objectively tried to do the math. Now, I'm convinced that I have a son out there. I'm convinced I know who it is. And with all humility, with all sincerity, with every fiber of my being, I've tried to do everything that I possibly could to be sensitive, compassionate, and try to see it from the perspective of those involved, the connections, right? So, like any other person would, you reach out, very subtle, and you present your case, right? Whatever evidence that you have. And you hope that the person that you're presenting it to will also just take into consideration that it takes courage to do so. Let me tell you why I'm saying that. As you all know, you've heard of situations and scenarios where the outcome is not favorable, right? Where the parent makes a logical choice to try to turn a blind eye. May it be because of, number one, it's fear. Number two, they put finances over the child. And what is given in return is denial. But at the end of the day, you made your bed, you have to lie in it. And the one thing that you can't do is run from yourself. So in turn, all you can do is be authentic. So that's all I've tried to do. Now, I know some of you may be saying, well, Joel, you told us about your daughter. You know, the one that you don't have access to, the one that doesn't want to give you time of day, the one that doesn't acknowledge you. And I'm going to be honest with you, family. Even though we are the architects of our story, I know in my heart of hearts, I ain't built like that. That's not who I am. And it goes against what I stand for as a man. And I know that she knows that too, because for collectively 14 years now, I've tried to do everything I could to be in her life. Still to this day, I use the tools that are afforded. I text, I call. Only should not be answered. But no matter what the circumstances, what I've come to understand is this, and I will stand on this to my last day, my last breath. It doesn't change the love that I have for my daughter. It will never change that. And, short version is this. I see the impact of not having a connection with your parents and how that emotionally, economically can have an influence on your life. So as a parent, it's your responsibility to turn every stone, to do all that you could, but never close that proverbial door. And before someone says, well, you know, Gerald, you sound like you was a deadbeat. No, that's not me. Because still to this day, just like her first breath, I always provided financially as well as her benefits. She's always had that. Always. I never deprived my responsibility for my beloved daughter. And I'm saying this to somebody because you may be in the same position. Because you hear people use the term deadbeat dad, deadbeat mom, sperm donor, unfortunately, a carrier, you know, if it's the mom. And it's very heartbreaking. It's very heartbreaking. Because no one has the ability to choose their parents. And I commend anyone who is afforded the opportunity to raise a child. You know, if I had my hat, I would tip it to you because that's love. You know, you hear people always say, you know, especially with the guys, like, well, you know, my dad is such and such and such. And he was this or she was that. And that used to bother me. Because, you know, everybody's story has a commonality, but everybody's stories are different. You know what I'm saying? So, what I'm saying is, until you actually know all the factors, because there are situations where you may have biological parents that want nothing more to be in their child's life. But because of immaturity, because of manipulation, and that's a harsh word, but because they didn't have the tools to fight, they have to live with that. They have to live with that. Now, let me go back to my prospective son. I've already showed you. You guys know who he is. He looks just like me. I mean, when they say proverbially chip off the old block, he is. Can't be any more proud. Because he's doing his thing. He's doing his thing. And, you know, it's weird because I've seen examples of when the child grows up, the child steps into their life, and now they have a platform that they're in the public eye. Maybe through athletics, maybe through whatever their calling is. And then you always hear the scenario of, okay, now that parent wants to be involved for unsavory reasons. And, you know, I've said this countless times. I wouldn't care if they were picking up cans on the street. As long as they're safe, as long as they're happy, that's all I could ever want. That's what any parent would want, you know. But, you know, this is one of my challenges for 2020 because you know what my fear is? My true fear is not being able to afford them their history and not affording them the opportunity to actually have a discussion for whatever insecurities or questions they may have had, you know, because we're not going to be here forever, fam. We're not. One of my most favorite movies, classic, it's called The Imitation of Life. One of the stars in that movie was an actress named Natalie Wood. She was an up-and-coming actress, and unfortunately, you know, her life was cut short, not even in the prime of her career. And if you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend check it out, because that movie has so many hidden messages and nuances that affect each and every one of us today. You know, I really believe that movie was way before our time. Way before our time. Why am I saying all this? Because, you know, as I said, I've been doing the math. I've been going back in my mind. I've been turning every stone. And I'm convinced. I am convinced. But sadly, trying to keep it together. You know, it's kind of hard. You know, part of me feels cheated. Cheated of not having the opportunity to be there. You know, because, you know, with his story, I didn't even know he existed. Didn't. And I've been trying to do everything in my power to connect the dots as best I can. And I understand this could be scary. Someone out of the blue reaches out and says, hey, I'm related to you. We got a lot of crazy people in the world, fam. We have a lot of opportunities out here. But I can truly say this for both of them. My intent has always been as it should have been. And I stand on this. It's pure. You know, we always hear this, Queens, about you complaining about not having good men. And you always will have that argument. But I'm a firm believer that as a father, you have a daughter. You empower them by your example. So if you're not there, you're basically allowing them to be influenced by whatever is deemed as love, even if it's negative. Think about it this way. This is not shade, but I gotta use this as an analogy. Think about the gangs out here. Think about the petty crimes that's out here. These people that choose these paths didn't wake up one day and say, hey, that's what I'm going to do. There had to be some type of influence. Or it was, I can relate to said example. But the greatest example that a child will ever have will be its parents or the people deemed in their life to mold them. And this has long-lasting effects. So, as a man, that don't sit well with me. That don't sit well with me at all. It's talk. I'm going to tell you what, 2020 has definitely been a year. The narrative is be patient. Some things you don't have control of. But don't give up the faith. Don't give up. So I continue to reach out because it would be a disservice to give up. And I explained that to him, like, I didn't know you existed. And I said that with all love. I just didn't. But when I looked at the timeline and the math, family, I was 24 years old. Actually, if you want to base it off of his birthday and the conception, I was 24 years old and 9 months old. You don't even know who you are when you're 24. You don't. You kind of have a knack of what you like, what you don't like, but you're still trying to figure it out. You're still trying to figure it out. I'm a firm believer, you don't know who you really are until you're 35, if you're blessed to see 35. That's why we have certain said schisms, or shall I say habits, and perceptions, and some perceptions may be biases, because it's based off of the experience that we have. But if we don't have the ability to be objective, to separate emotion from logic, we're going to always miss the mark. I'm saying this to y'all because you may be in your 20s right now. Be honest with yourself. You don't have it all together. There's a lot of stuff you ain't figured out yet because you haven't experienced it. It hasn't sat on your chest yet and forced you to make a proper choice. Now, I'm going to get off my soapbox. But it hit me this morning. I was like, man, after I prayed, one of the things I do when I pray, I always include, Lord, I know everything happens for a reason, and this is nothing but preparation for the validation. And I will believe this until my last breath. God's going to afford me the opportunity to have my union with my baby girl and my son. I will never give that up. Never. But I also know it's about preparation. And I'm going to tell you how God works. You know, I mentioned this, and I'm getting ready to break 30. I need to hurry up and get off of this. You know, the one thing that I always longed for ever since I was 16 years old, I always knew when I was 16, I said, if I was ever blessed to be a father, every experience I went through will be a tool so they won't make the same decisions and choices I made. That's what every parent and should intend to do, because you want your child to have the best life, a better life, you know. So my will never be broken. Never. Never. But it echoed, family. It echoed hard. I was like, damn, 24 years old. 24 years old. Look here, fam. I started my Air Force career when I was 23. I was a late bloomer because one time I didn't want to join the service. I always knew what the service could give me if I made the decision. And here's something a lot of people don't know. At first, I wanted to join the Marines. Yep. Always did. And the reason for that was because my dad was in the Air Force. And I had resentment towards the Air Force because he was always gone. He was always gone. And I was like, the military's taking my dad away. Taking my dad away. And I basically had to raise myself. But as I look back in life now, I appreciate everything that man has given me. Everything. You know, I have so much respect for my dad. This doesn't discredit my father. And through the years, I've tried to make amends because for a long time I held a grudge. Fam, I held a grudge against my father because he was not there. And I felt cheated. And I didn't, it's just like giving a teenager a brand new car. But the car is your life. And they throw you the keys and say, okay. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to crash. You might end up killing somebody, if not killing yourself. And I had to navigate through that. I mean, when I was a child, I suffered from depression. Bad. Like Justin Timberlake put out a song a long time ago, Cry Me a River. I really believe that's why I have these bags now. I've had them since 2011. And I realized, the one thing about my life is I know what unconditional love is, but I never had it. Oh man, there were people in my life that shouldn't have never been there because I never saw my worth. I never saw my value. And this is not no shade to them. The relationships, the friendships that were not in my best interest. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that because it would have never molded me into the man you see now. This does not give me a right to turn around and be evil, you do a disservice to yourself having a vengeful spirit. That'll kill you quicker than stress would. You do realize that every time you decide to do something that you know is wrong, pride, ego. There's nothing wrong with being proud, but pride, ego, those are the emotional daggers that will cut your lifeline short, fam. Listen, the end goal is to protect, but to give honor to your lineage, the people that came before you. A lot of things, and this is 33, I gotta wrap this. Even at 51 years old, my grandmother was sacred to me, and still to this day, I know she's looking down, and I know that just because of that bond, there's certain things I will never do because I would not want her to be disappointed, nor my family. But at the end of the day, with everything going on right now, family, it is about family. It is about getting out of your way. Say the things you need to say while you got the time to say it. Because if you're walking around with this notion that, well, nah, they ain't calling me, so bump them. you're disrespecting. You might as well be spitting in your own face. It's never too late, family, if they're above ground. Never. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some work. Be committed to that work, though. If I think I said enough. And listen, kings, if you have been afforded the right to be someone's parent, let me tell you something. It's okay to be scared. It's okay. Admit it. And let that be the motivation to be the best you. You may have been in a situation where you were in a relationship. You thought it was going to last forever. And it didn't. You still have to be a parent. And let me say this too before I wrap this up. If you're in a paternal bond and it's deemed toxic, do not compromise yourself out of trying to match the same energy from the mother. And I'm saying this out of love, because guess what? Maybe she don't have the tools to communicate and it's gotten physical. That don't mean you're supposed to be there. You don't need to be with anybody that you gotta pull along, pull teeth. It's supposed to be tandem. And when you're a parent, it ain't about you no more. It's about them. Don't you ever forget that. I know my heart of hearts, they gonna see this. So I'm gonna say this to both of y'all. As long as I've got air in my lungs, I will always love you. And I long for the day when we are one. Only God knows when, but I know He's going to deliver that. And I look at it like this: all this is preparing me to be the best. I'm not talking from a perspective of fairy tales. Nah, it ain't about fairy tales. It's about reality. So if you're hearing this, just know I love you. I'm going to always love you. Till my last breath. Peace.